You're watching the Marc Lamont Hill official YouTube channel.
Good morning, Ekaro. Everyone, good morning or good afternoon whenever you're watching this, or greetings. I am April R. Silver. I am the host of Ascending, and we are back. We are back for another episode. We're 6 episodes in now, so family, it's so good to see you. We're going to be going, we are live now, but we're going to bring on a guest in just a little bit. But I want to just give everybody like a couple of 30 seconds to get in the room, tell your people to watch live. Y'all have been so attentive. We want to make sure this day, that we are hopefully on live on YouTube and Twitter. But if you're on Twitter right now watching this, or X, go over there to YouTube and watch on the Marc Lamont Hill official YouTube channel. So it's so good to have you here. Tell your people. If you notice, if you've been with us, you know that the week before last, I started doing this book shout out. I don't know what we're going to call it, but every week I want to do something where we tap into the importance of Black thought and Black authors and Black writers. So I had mentioned, and my producer, shout out to Drake Almighty, Kevin and Aaron, they're going to put it in the chat. But we had referenced the book Create Dangerously by Edwidge Danticat, one of my favorite writers. So we referenced that. But last week when we had Mayor Raz Baraka on, I forgot to mention this book. How could I forget? Can you all see it okay? No, right here. There we go. This book, I forgot to mention last week, We Are Worth Fighting For. This is a book by Dr. Joshua M. Myers, or Josh, as we call him, as he prefers to be called. This is a book on the 1989 student protests. It's going to be in the chat. An amazing book. It's apropos. That book is going to double for last week and this week, because this week we're talking about education and Black education, and that book is about the protests from 1989 at Howard University in Washington, D.C. Our brother, the mayor of Newark, soon to be governor of New Jersey, that was him on the cover yelling at the police, because that's how he was getting down. That's how we get down. So get that book on your book list already, if you don't already have that. That's important. We're going to be referencing some other books soon. So this is all of my fillers, so y'all can get in, tell your people to come in, so we can start officially this particular episode. On this episode of Ascending, because we go live every Saturday at 11 Eastern, we're going to be talking about education, the crisis in education. This conversation that hit the news waves, airwaves some time ago, about the current administration, the devilish, oppressive current administration in the White House, wanting to dismantle the U.S. Department of Education. So that's a rippling conversation. That's a number of things that we can touch upon for sure. And it is my honor to let you know that we have two educators. One of them happens to be one of my besties, right? AKANKE is an educator, AKANKE Washington, pardon me. We're going to bring her on in just a second, but she's an educator. She's a mother. She's an Orisha priest. She is an educator at heart, with her bachelor's from Howard University. Shout out once again to Howard University. And has her master's in education. Kake, you'll tell me later if I got it wrong. Educational leadership, I think you'll correct me. And is working. She's a doctoral candidate right now in education. And this whole focus on education actually stemmed from one of the bazillion conversations that she and I've had over the years, that I want her to talk about what people misunderstand about the U.S. Department of Education and how it functions, and how it's not a good thing that it be dismantled. But we're going to talk about all of that and more. Before we bring her on, let me just talk about Black education. Shout out to the Trojans. Y'all see my Virginia State University? I got everybody's t-shirts. I'll be wearing them. So shout out to HBCUs, shout out to Virginia State University, and shout out to Dr. Makola Abdullah, 14th president, Virginia State, VSU. So on that note, let's segue and bring on my sister, my one of my besties, Akanke Tyra Washington. Welcome. Hey,
Hey, thank
how
you.
are you?
I'm good. You?
Good. You look beautiful.
Thank you. I woke up like this. No, I'm
I know.
joking.
I know you did every morning. Every morning. I am so happy and honored that you're, with us. I when I do programs and I have the opportunity to do so, I always like to bring you in. Remember, we did this time last year. We did the conversation on reparations with Rhymefest and Chief Ayanda
I
and
remember
Nana
this.
Osei. That was a great conversation, and you lit up the
I still have
space.
things to say. I still have things to say about
You
that.
got a lot of things to say. We only have an hour,
Oh,
but or maybe an hour or so, but you got a lot of things to say. So thank you, sis, for coming on. And I'm looking forward to an engaging educational conversation. So thank you. On that note, I want to set up the stage for Dr. CAMIKA Royal to come on. Now, she is someone who I don't know like I know you, Akanke, of course, but in terms of following her work, her badass positions, and her revolutionary approach and radical approach to education, I met her through Mark. Shout out to Marc Lamont Hill, Princess, everybody over on the Marc Lamont Hill official YouTube channel, family. I met her through him years ago when Mark and I were running the Speakers Bureau. And so I was like, she's a badass. But we didn't connect strongly. And so when this opportunity came up, I was like, yo, we got to have her. God, please have her say yes. So Dr. CAMIKA Royal to the stage. It is so good. There you are. There you are.
Good
So
morning.
good to see you. Good morning. How are you, sis?
I'm great. I'm glad to be here with you too. So thank you for the invite.
Of course, of course. Just get used to it because as long as your schedule permits, and Akanke, as long as your schedule permits, because we're gonna be here for a minute, I'll be pulling y'all in and out. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Um, as we keep on Saturdays, 11 a.m. All the time. So let's jump right in to this conversation. Everybody tell your people we talking about education, a crisis in American education, the U.S. Department of education being shut down or in the process of being shut down and how that impacts our families, yes, our communities. But that's just the jump off, right? Like we could talk about it all. So Akanke,
hmm.
I'm gonna start with you. You work in education, you always have.
Hmm.
Currently, you're in the city of Philadelphia.
Yes.
You and I have had plenty of conversations about this for sure. I'm gonna turn the mic over to you and you start with what people don't understand, what they're missing if the current administration dismantles the U.S. Department of Education. Let's just start there.
Okay. First of all, well, I think I just want to give a little context. This came up, April, with you and I, because I was talking about a training that I was doing for principals the day after the election. And principals and teachers are responsible for holding the space for their students who might have been deeply deflated, and you might have had some students who were exceptionally happy. And in this conversation, I had a principal say he was really concerned about if the Department of Education got dismantled. And then I had a principal say, well, what's wrong with that? The money will just go, the federal money will just be turned over to the states. Now, I happen to work in the state of Philadelphia, in the state of Pennsylvania, where the Philadelphia school district participated in a fair funding lawsuit against the state, right? They sued the state for not funding school districts appropriately, and they won. And we still haven't seen that money. So the idea that the federal government would give money to states to manage appropriately to fund schools is just not believable. And I had administrators who had not thought through that. So that was my first alarm, that we're not thinking about the role that the Department of Education has in funding underfunded schools and in distributing money to college students. So that was the first thing. But secondly, when I hear especially right-wing Republicans talking about dismantling the Department of Education, it's a dog whistle to me, because before we didn't have a department in education before 1970. We had different branches regulating different things. After Brown v. Board of Ed, the role of the Department of Education became a regulatory body that you have to now make sure that students' civil rights are protected. And then, they were instrumental in ushering in desegregation. You have Southern states who have not recovered from that. They're still mad, right? They're still mad at the Department of Education and its role for mandating integration, even though we're not really integrated.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a dog whistle to me to say to the Southern states, we're going to go back to pre-Brown. And I need educators to understand that. We don't know and we don't know what the impact is going to look like, because there's federal legislation and there's state legislation. We don't know what it's going to look like, but I want people to be in spaces and communities where we're thinking about the role the Department of Education has, how we can resist, what we want from it, and then they're quite honest, like what we don't want from it.
Right. I think that's the least of it. I mean, that's the starting point. One of the things, AKANKE, that we talked about on more than one occasion is the lack of, to your point, the lack of context, the lack of understanding, and the lack of what the reality is here for Black people, despite what the law says, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you can illuminate the conversation that we had about people who are like, no, the schools are integrated now. You remember what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So CAMIKA, the chair of my dissertation committee, I'm doing my dissertation on a segregated school in the South that my grandmother went to, right? Okay. And I was explaining to her that that there's new scholarship and new research looking at these segregated schools that were successful. Maybe we can learn from the things that they have done, since the majority of our schools are still segregated and underfinanced. So what did they do to be successful? And my chair insisted that we had Brown. We are not still segregated. And she is a first generation Indian immigrant. So I wasn't offended. I just understood that she didn't understand, right? I wasn't really offended, but she didn't understand the difference between the law and de facto segregation. That we have laws on the books, but because of the way in which our school systems are funded by property and segregate and redlining, we are still highly segregated. And believe it or not, the North is more segregated than Southern schools.
Yeah.
What I would add to that is, God bless you in your endeavor, working on that dissertation. So here's what concerns me. That to me is not a matter of not knowing research, because Vanessa Siddle Walker's book on the segregated school in North Carolina, right, came out in 1996. So almost 30 years ago. That is not a matter of, and that's not new research. So that's not a matter of her being unaware of research. That's a matter of her buying into a narrative that is false about what exists in this country, which worries me a little bit about, you moving through your process. But, we trust God that you'll have what you need, and that, you're pushing back against that.
Yeah, I think that, but that's why y'all are here, right? To bring the truth out. Dr. Royal, CAMIKA,
Yes, ma'am.
Let's talk about, let's use that as a segue to talk about your work.
Mhm.
They're gonna put it in the chat. I was like, I don't have a copy of your book. That's we gotta fix that. But
Okay.
there we go. There we go. There we go.
Yes, I have a copy right here.
Yes, yes, not paid for us. Let's use this as a segue. Thank you so much.
Yep.
At to what you have, your body of work in this field. Let's turn it over to you.
So my research examines the sort of political context of urban school districts, particularly urban school reform, and how those reforms often intersect with Black educators. So when I was listening to AKANKE talk about the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and I just couldn't help but think about Philadelphia and how Philadelphia schools are still not desegregated. There were, lawsuits for years, and people they were going to remove funding and this, that, and the other, but they're not desegregated because it's not really possible to desegregate in the way that we've talked about. Gloria Ladson-Billings has written about the fallacy of trying to use math to solve social issues, right? So when people's sort of policies and their intention has been around numbers. So if we can have, 1/3 be Black and 1/3 be white and 1/3 be Spanish speaking or something like that. That's not how neighborhoods work. That's not how humanity works. And so Philadelphia is one such school district that is still not desegregated. That is actually not something that concerns me because I am a proponent of Black education. I'm a proponent of people choosing the type of school they want to go to. What I am not a proponent of is state enforced segregation, where the state decides who has access to what. But when people self-select, just like I'm fine with single sex education, when people self-select, I think that's something altogether different. And so, I'm an HBCU grad, and I'm now a professor at an HBCU. So
Shout out to Morgan State.
shout out to Morgan State University, where I direct the doctoral program in urban education leadership. But please don't. I was getting ready to say we have gotten an overabundance. I was getting ready to say, please don't nobody else apply for the fall because we have gotten so many applications. I am overwhelmed with all this Black brilliance trying to come and get a doctorate at Morgan State University. But our final deadline is March 1st. So yeah, there's that. But yeah, there's so many places where we're still not desegregated, and I would rather not spend my time and energy focused on that. I would rather spend time and energy focused on how to get Black children what they need wherever they are, whatever type of school they're in. And yeah, so that's my sort of thoughts about what AKANKE was talking about in terms of school desegregation.
I think that's a good segue into this notion that we have what we need, right? We have what we need as a community. This is trying times. This is a death lufts that's happening right now. Language alert. It's a lot of fuckery going on, right? For communities, our community and others. But what we have is precedent for uh, turning into self, pulling out from us what we need. So I want to use that as a segue into a conversation around freedom schools. The way that we've come together to teach ourselves, the way that people are trying to figure out right now, what are we going to do? And we can go back in history to say and see what we have done when we've needed to take care of self, and that's self with a capital S, right? The community at large. We created the schools. Shout out, this just came to me not out of nowhere, but Brother Roy Canton, may he rest in peace. When I first started teaching, I don't think a lot of people know I taught, right? Shout out to Cherie Warren, Dr. Cherie Warren, because that's when I started teaching in the late 90s in New York City public schools. And I think it was 258 is where I was when I first started. I taught for a couple of years, again, late 90s. And there was a brother, Roy Canton, that used to have classes. And the classes were called Africans Helping Africans.
Mm-hmm.
And he was the custodian of gosh, I can't remember. It was right in the heart of Bed-Stuy. He was the custodian, and the person who brought me in to the school was like, "You need to know Brother Roy Canton." Okay, he's the custodian, whatever you say, but he held classes on Saturday where people from the community at no charge would learn how to plumb, like plumbing and electrician, and people, whoever wanted to learn how to sew could learn how to sew. Like all of these classes he gave to the community because his thing was we need to know how to take care of ourselves regardless of whatever, and we need to learn it from ourselves, and we need these skills. So that just came to me, and I needed to shout out because he was this amazing human being that did all of this for free on in the schools, in the middle school there in the heart of Bed-Stuy. So talk about self-sufficiency. So Akanke, let's start with you, your connection, your history, what you know to be true about freedom schools and this whole concept of self-reliance.
Yeah, thank you for that. I was just thinking, I agree with Kamika that wherever Black children are, they need quality education. And we have a history of, as an African people, trying to carve those spaces out for us. My daughter went to independent African school in Brooklyn, Kush. I've always supported CB, the Council of Independent Black Institutions. I believe in African-centered education. And at the same exact time, I understood that the majority of our students were in public schools. So I serve in public schools. But there are models I would, especially now, I urge everybody to look at the history of citizenship schools with Septima Clark deciding to educate in her community was largely around teaching people to pass the voters registration test. And those citizenship schools later became freedom schools. There's a long history of SNCC and freedom schools. And even right now, the SNCC Legacy Project, they do virtual training around organizing. But those models exist for us to tap into. I deeply believe that we're not going to get out of this without community. And those models exist. I also want to, Kamika mentioned Vanessa Sidler Walker. She also has the Lost Education of Horace Tate. So we have models of Black educators organizing nationally, right? We need to look at those models. We need national organization, but I don't want us to mythologize segregation. And it was so perfect. If we read Jim Crow's Pink Slip, we know the devastation that Black educators suffered. When we integrated, we lost 100,000 Black teachers. We haven't recovered from that loss, right? I'm not even sure if you're not a academic studying education that we really recognize that there's a loss. Right now, we have a loss in Black educators in the teacher workforce. And one of the myths that is told was that Black people just aren't into education anymore, but it's a myth, right? Black educators were pushed out of education. They were fired en masse. And then people in the community witnessed that pushing out. So people didn't choose to go into education, right? But the community has not recovered from that loss. And so we're going to have to, knowing all the information, all the details, all the models helps us to have a starting point on where we can organize and work to educate our babies.
And Akanke, when we were at Howard together, correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't there a fight when this is the late 90s? Wasn't there a fight to save the School of Education? Because that was a big jeopardy. Am I remember that correctly?
I don't know if the School of Education was ever in jeopardy, but the School of Education shifted while we was at Howard. And it's why, so when we were talking about what my bachelor's is in, you was like education. And I was like, no, it's in history.
History, right.
And because I've been in education forever, but I think at that time you could major in a liberal arts subject and minor in education and have enough credits to either teach that content area or teach elementary. And there was a shift in education, and it wasn't just at Howard, it was nationally. Now you have elementary education, and they keep narrowing the degree, right? When I graduated, you could get what it was called common branches. You could teach K through 6, right? Now it's K through 4, 5 through 8. But it is a weeding out process. It is part of the weeding out process. And we saw the beginnings of that when they started to shift in the School of Education at Howard.
Right. I think you bring up an important point that I want to segue and toss it over to Dr. Royal, to Kamika. This thing about how segregation, like we experience the loss in our Black educators community. And so this is a broader question, Dr. Royal, that I want to ask you. As Black educators, you all, career-wise, and me formally, what is Black education?
It's a really interesting question, and I think the answer is different depending on who you ask. I want to start out by talking about one of my former professors from North Carolina Central University, Dr. Floyd Farabee in the English department. When I think about, so I was listening to AKANKE and thinking about when I told him I was interviewing for Teach for America back in early 1999. I had been an English major and I had a concentration in education, so I wanted to teach high school English, but it was going to take me, I was like an extra semester to student teach, and I wanted to graduate with my class. And so when I told Dr. Farabee that I was going to interview for Teach for America, I was going to be a teacher, he was like, "Why would you do that?" And I adore Dr. Farabee, and he said it to me out of love. And the love was that he felt like I was smart. He felt like teachers were treated badly. And he was just like, why would you spend your time there, right? There are so many other things you could do. There are a number of Black students who have similar stories around being warned by elders that, there was a time when Black women could only be teachers or nurses. And so for those of us who are considered smart or talented, we should take our talents elsewhere, maybe not deal with some of the headaches and make more money. But I mentioned Dr. Farabee because when I think of him, he is what Black education is to me. There were a lot of students in my era. I was at North Carolina Central from 95 to 99, and there were several students in the English department that would do whatever they could to avoid taking his classes because he was hard. He was hard, and he was serious about writing. He was serious about reading. He was serious about turning us into scholars and really sort of building us up as scholars. But I, being the Philadelphian I am, and I know you two as New Yorkers will understand this, I was like, I ain't about to be scared of this man taking his class. Like, why would I do that? He was very difficult, right? So he would get all his red marks on all the papers. And he would, sort of have this scowl sometimes talking to people. I still remember lessons he taught about this story called A White Heron, Sylvia and an ornithologist, and she is the bird, she is the trees. And I was just sitting there watching him like, this man is so
He's all into it, huh?
My God. And I would go back to him like, I really don't, all right, I'll take it on the chin, the comments you left me, but I don't like how you marked up my paper and all this red, like it's hurting my feelings. And so the next week when he gave back the paper, he was like, well, I put it in purple this week. Does that make you feel better? Right. But this is to say, he was serious, okay? But this is the same person when I told him that I was pursuing being a teacher and that I needed to plan a sample lesson, sat with me for 3 hours to plan my 5-minute lesson. The person who told me, don't go do that. Don't go be a teacher. But if you're going to be a teacher, sit down with me so I can get you together. Right?
Wow.
Black education to me is this very loving force that looks at us, that where you tell people, here's what I think you should do, but you still have options. Right. I'm going to tell you what I think based on what I see about the world, but I know that you have your own vision. And so I'm not going to stop you. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to support you and to equip you for the journey you want to walk, whether or not I think you should walk it. I'm gonna tell you whether or not I think you should walk in, but if that's the way you're gonna go, let me tell you what you need. Let me give you what I think I can give you to equip you for the path you're getting ready to pursue. The best of Black education is us supporting each other academically, but also personally, socially, communally, politically, economically.
Yeah.
That is what Black education is.
Yeah, you know what you're making, and this is a little bit of a segue, but not a whole bunch. I'm gonna ask Drake Almighty and the producers. I need a banner that says something around HBCUs. I need a banner because this part of the conversation, I'm doing a setup right now, right? This part of the conversation, I want to talk about because I'm a Howard grad. Akanke is a Howard grad. You just where's your HBCU?
North Carolina Central
No,
University, home of the
North
Mighty
Carolina
Eagles in Durham, North Carolina.
Exactly. I got on my Virginia State University of Virginia State University. So we've been nourished, right, in the HBCU land, right? We've been nourished, and we've had plenty of conversations. And I remember people asking, why would you go to Howard? You know, I entered Howard in 1986 proudly, right? Only school I applied to. The only school I applied to when I got in. But why would you go to a Black university? I never knew there was a such thing as Black colleges and universities until 11th grade. I did not know. Why? What more so than the future of HBCUs, what is the importance of HBCUs? I know the answer, but you touched on it, Dr. Royal, and I want you to explain it further. And Akanke, I want your take on it too. As a matter of fact, let me start with you, Akanke. What is the value from your perspective? What do you know to be true about the importance of HBCUs?
So my whole education is Black. Like, so I don't know anything other. I went to an all Black high school, and my guidance counselor tried to convince my family to send me to a white college so that I could have cultural diversity, because the Black people from the Caribbean and the Black people from other parts of the world were not considered diverse. But so I know nothing other than being in institutions where I am nurtured and supported by Black people. And I feel like at a HBCU, there is the nurturing and support you get from your professors. There is the camaraderie that you build with other Black people. And then just seeing Black brilliance from all over the world, that's what shows up on your campus. There's no real substitute for that, right? There is a level of confidence that I feel like I developed when I was at Howard that I didn't have entering Howard, being exposed to a body of Black thought. It just opens up the world for me, and that was my entire education. I didn't enter white institutions until I was in grad school. And then I was like pearl clutching, like, why? Why would anyone do this?
But let me take what you said, because we feel it so passionately, and let me twist it a little bit for you, Dr. Royal, right? So the question being, can't people get this at PWIs, predominantly white institutions? Because we know in our audience it's a whole bunch of people who didn't even go to college in the first place, number one, and then a whole bunch that didn't go to HBCUs, and or if they went to college, they went to a white institution as a Black person, but perhaps have their own version of that love and that nurturing. Can you address that, or maybe do a comparison and contrast? Maybe can you?
Well, so I'm like, if I answer, I'm going to answer this, but you about to have the Black folks at PWIs upset with me when I answer it. So similar to my background in HBCUs or Black institutions is a little different. So in my book, I actually talk in the introduction about my mother having a bad experience in the school district of Philadelphia as a high school student at Germantown High School, where she was told she wasn't college material. And then, so she didn't go to college. A few years later, she's married to my father. They have my sister, and the principal of my sister's elementary school tells my mother says, oh, my daughter's not reading as well as she was in first grade. So she's like, I feel like there's something else she needs. And my mom told me this story about the principal essentially saying, you don't have the credentials to question how we're teaching your daughter. So my mother at that point, she's like, well, I don't like how I was serviced, as a student, but we're not doing this to my children. And so she puts me and my sister in allegedly Christian school in the suburbs of Philadelphia in Delaware County. And I say allegedly Christian on purpose. My sister, I would say, was terrorized at that school. We are 5.5 years apart, but 4 years apart we're 4 years apart in school. We had very different experiences. She kind of struggled through school, as you heard me say, first grade. Now my sister's doing great now. She works at Michigan State University. She's the other Dr. Royal. She's interim co-vice president of something over at Michigan State. I don't know. And Shaw U grad, also an HBCU grad. But my mother put us in this school because she was worried about our academics. So in middle school, both of us switched to public school, which was fine. It was a neighborhood public school. And for high school, I go to Central High School in Philadelphia. So one of the oldest public high schools in the country, opened in 1836 or 1838. They started admitting girls in 1984. And so it was there that my counselor, they were kind of like, what do you mean you just want to apply to HBCUs? Now, for me, that came from the first person in my family to go to college, which was my older cousin. Shout out to Yvonne, if she's watching, who went to, I want to say Central State for a year and came back home so she could, be with her boyfriend in Philly. But she was like, y'all have to go to HBCUs. That's where you have to go. And so that's all I was applying to. When I told one of my teachers I was going to go to NCCU, he said, I never heard of that. And I said, it's a small Black college, and he's like, well, where is it? I said, it's in Durham. He said, Duke's in Durham, Royal, you're smart. Why wouldn't you just go to Duke?
Wow.
Now,
Wow.
Support and camaraderie happen at a PWI, I guess. I don't know, right? I can't speak to that. Here's what I will say in fairness. The experience I had, the support I not even just had, but still have at my HBCU, everybody doesn't get that experience.
Right.
Okay. So my professors, when I graduated from college in 1999, in 2011, I defended my dissertation at Temple University, and two of my undergraduate professors, both Black women, flew to Philadelphia to be in the room for my dissertation defense. Because these are women who have invested themselves in my life, my whole life, and wanted to be there to support me. 2 weeks ago, I got a text from my political science professor telling me that he's proud of me, right? This is somebody I met at NCCU 30 years ago when I was a freshman. Can that be replicated at a PWI for Black people? Somewhat, right? Like, I guess, I don't know, because I've never been a student. I got a master's from Hopkins and a doctorate from Temple, and I know that community is what you make it, right? So can support and camaraderie exist? Absolutely. But it's something very different to be at an HBCU. And I'm saying that now as somebody who's back at an HBCU. And even when things are not what I might expect at this HBCU, I would still choose it any day of the week and twice on Sunday. This is where I hope to be until I retire. I'm about to ride out these next, 19 years.
I love it. But you know what, to your point, Royal, the AKANKE and I and many others, like that book that I held up, We Are Worth Fighting For, it illuminates the way that we hold our institutions accountable. And as much as we love Howard University, like for real, we still were the ones that shut that shit down in 1989, right? We shut it down because this is when the board of trustees was going to have Lee Atwater, or he was already on the board. So there's no romanticizing that everything is perfect at an HBCU or wherever you are if you decide to go to college, right? There's no romanticizing that. Howard got a lot of stuff that it needs to correct straight up. I am currently a plaintiff in a lawsuit against the board of trustees at Howard University, right? In 2025, that's true. And I graduated 30 something years ago. So to your point about the need for us to yes, love on us in our institutions and hold them accountable at the same time, like with a grip, hold them accountable, right? Because we love you, we got to hold you accountable. I wanted to put that out there. Akanke, I'll turn it over to you if you want to elaborate on that, because that's important. We can love and critique at the same time.
Yep. Absolutely. And there's always been Howard the institution and Howard the people, right? And there always been a clash. It's not new. It's always been a clash. But I wanted to say, for Black people who find themselves at PWIs, my daughter didn't go to a HBCU because when she graduated high school, she was 16 and she wanted to major in agriculture. I'm here in Philly, the two HBCUs closest didn't have an ag program, even though Lincoln has tons of land. They didn't have an ag program. So she went to a white institution close, but I had to me, I felt like I had to put extra eyes and hands and love on her because I wasn't turning her over to camaraderie, but I had to find it. So she had a campus mom. I found a Black woman. We found a Black woman who worked in the office. That was her campus mom. She had people on campus, adults on campus that could communicate with me. And she started a Black student union on her campus, and she created that community. And I'm saying that because, and especially now when we're talking about getting rid of the Department of Education, funding at HBCUs is drying up. They don't give scholarships the way they used to. And in New York, you can go to school for free if your parents make under $80,000. So some people are making financial decisions. Mm-hmm. And so I'm just saying, if you don't have access to a HBCU because of your pockets, when you get there, you have to try and create that community, because I think that, and I try and encourage my daughter to write about this. There are students who don't make it through because they don't have the community. There were multiple times when I wanted to drop out of Howard. And if it wasn't my grandmother saying, well, if you drop out in 2 weeks, you got to have a job and an apartment. If that wasn't the voice, there were voices of my professors saying, you can't drop out. You can't give up. And you need those spaces. And if you're going to a PWI, you might have to create them for yourself. And if you're sending your students into those spaces, you might have to help them create those spaces.
And I don't see the chat, the live chat that's happening right now, but I do know the producers put up on the screen. There are people here, and for those who don't know, PWI is an abbreviation for predominantly white institution. And they're in the chat saying, yeah, y'all are right. There's a difference. And but from experience, if you're a Black student at a PWI, you got to create that community. So shout out to, who was that? Curly Coco. There she go. Yeah. That's real. So, now just bear with me, right? Because this is new off of the top. I want to talk about the fact that, so what if you decide not to go to college? What if the academic route is not your thing? You don't want to be a part of the intellectual community, or you don't have the means. Maybe you do. Like, in what way does one become educated if it's outside of academia? And that's just off of the top. Dr. Roy, I'll start with you.
I'm going to be real honest. I feel like with the way technology changes, this is not an area I can really speak to. However, I do think about a young man that I met on the train a few weeks ago, coming from Philadelphia, who went to one semester college, and we had a long conversation the whole time. I love talking to the young people, right? Chatting them up. And he worked for Amtrak. He had learned a trade. He learned to be an electrician. And he ended up with a job at Amtrak. And prior to that, he was telling me that he had worked at the airport. doing like luggage transport. So I think one of the most important things for young people is to get a trade, even if you're not going to go to school. I'm not as adept at knowing where those opportunities lie. I know some of our schools are vocational high schools where they're preparing young people for that. Oftentimes in community college, there's programs, but I also know we have a racist history in this country, even among the trade unions, right? And so a lot of times when our young people have learned the trades, they could not necessarily get into those unions to have access to those jobs. But one of the most important things you can do if you're not going to go to school is to find an adult, an elder, somebody who has a couple more years on you than you, so that you find out how to connect to those different opportunities.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I think that's spot on. Akanke?
So I want to say, CAMIKA, you went to school in Durham. The high school that I am researching for my dissertation, Booker T. Washington High School, was a successful segregated school in Rocky Mount, North Carolina, right? About an hour and a half away from Durham. And I have been interviewing alumni of this school, and they all talk about how much their teachers love them. And when I asked them, how did you know? What did they do to demonstrate that you were loved? One of the things out of many, but one of the things that they name is that their teachers would not let them graduate without a plan for their life, right? A plan. And they all say for some college was out of reach because they were poor and they couldn't afford it. But you had to have a plan, whether it was vocational, they had mechanics programs, they had bricklaying. You had to have a plan for your life. And so that even in going into college, I think young people need to think of their life as a plan, and they need loving adults to help them map that plan out, right? Whether it's vocational, because if it's vocational, like CAMIKA said, you're going to have to navigate the racism of the trade.
Anyway. Yeah.
Anyway, right?
Yeah.
Like you're going to have to, when my daughter was in high school, she took online classes with an independent African school in Atlanta. And one of the courses they had, the students had to find an adult who was in the career that they were interested in and get information about the obstacles and the racism within that career. She was like 15, right? But that the point is, you need that mentorship no matter where you go. And at one point in time, we were very intentional about providing that to our young people. This school was intentional. You could not graduate. It was a part of graduation. What is the plan for your life? And I think we need to be more intentional about asking young people to think about the future. Everything we know about brain development now, we know they're not going to naturally do it unless someone is ushering them through it. We need to set them on that path. What is the future for your life? Too many young people are influenced by social media. They're going to be a TikTok influencer.
Akanke, you spot on, right? You spot on, and I'm gonna enter this cautiously, this new piece, right? And I'm gonna go to you, Akanke, and then we're gonna go to CAMIKA. When I was strolling on Facebook, and somebody posted something about Hillman Talk.
Oh yeah.
And I thought it was a joke, right? So I did a little bit of a deep dive. I was like, oh, it's a thing. Like that's a Hillman Talk is a thing. So it's on TikTok.
Mm-hmm.
It's the online university. And I was like, oh no. So what do we now think a university is? It felt like and I'm not from the academy. I mean, in terms of like, advanced degrees beyond my bachelor's. And I was like, so what do we think a university is? And I was a little taken aback. I was clutching my pearls, like, and then so I posted on Facebook, like, Hillman Talk ? And people was like, some people was cringing and some people was like, oh, it's the best. It's the best thing ever. And granted, I had not done a deep dive except to see that it was a thing. And for those who don't know, Hillman is connected to the fictional, what was Different World. That was the name of the college on the television show, the sitcom called A Different World. That was the name. Iconic sitcom, A Different World from the 90s. That was the name of the college where these Black students were. And so it's the combination of that fictional college and TikTok and Hillman Talk, and it's a thing. And I think there's some controversy or whatever. But Akanke, what's your take on just the idea, because it's blown up?
So I have probably like lots of contradictory thoughts, right? I do follow Hillman Talk on TikTok. Some of the syllabi is amazing, right? But I feel, and I'm also very clear of the history to educate outside of the academy. There have been all kinds of freedom universities. So I don't think the academy owns that, right? But my only concern with Hillman Talk is how things get co-opted, right? How things get co-opted. And I also—
We need a banner, guys. Sorry. Akanke, go ahead.
I also feel like when I think of education, I think of social media and short videos and things like that as a tool in teaching, not the teaching itself, right? That I
Nice.
think that can be a tool, but so yeah, and so I know that can be contradictory, but there's a lot of great syllabi. There's a lot of great, I love books. There's a lot of great book lists going on there, and with those short videos, I think it's a jump off place. But
Okay.
I don't think it substitutes being in a community of learners where you can read and discuss and produce and get feedback. I don't think it's a good substitute for that, but I think it's a jumping off point.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Royal, CAMIKA, I want to turn that over to you. What are your thoughts? Are your thoughts contradictory on Hillman Talk, or?
I don't have thoughts on Hillman Talk. I am such a— listen, people get mad when I call myself old, but I have 3 TikToks that I posted like since the Eagles won, okay, almost 2 weeks ago. I don't want to learn any more social media. I am so over it, but I'm trying with TikTok. I have heard of Hillman Talk. I haven't ventured over to it. So I really don't know, enough about what they're doing over there.
Yeah.
I don't post that. I don't know why anybody would follow me on anything, because I don't post at all. But I'm a voyeur. No, on Facebook, I post my Wordle status every day. But I'm a voyeur, and I do. But most of my TikTok is dancing babies.
I know. When I posted that Hillman Talk question mark on my Facebook page, Josh Myers was like, he did that cringe face, like as if to say, "Oh no." And then there was other people. Shout out to Loree Daniel Favors. She was like, "It's amazing," or something like that. So I know that there's a wide spectrum, right, of people with different thoughts or whatever. But what I do agree with, because this is relative to what we're talking about, is 2025, right? We just now said that there are ways outside of the academy that people learn and nourish themselves and become educated and become informed and become enriched outside of a campus, right? That's we were brilliant before the academies existed. We taught each other before academies existed. So that's fundamental to what we all believe. We are, y'all got to come back. Y'all definitely got to come back. I want to give you all the opportunity to share any closing thoughts, make any plugs or whatever. And then I want to segue this into a follow-up on the Sonia Sanchez interview that I did on Ascending. If you all haven't seen my interview with Sonia Sanchez just about 3 weeks ago, go do that. And I'm good. I'll give an update before we close out. But Dr. Royal, CAMIKA, closing thoughts, things you want to wrap up, like it's yours. We're going to put you on solo. It's all yours.
Okay. Thank you. So first, I would say if you haven't, please go read my book. It is available online at online bookstores. You can purchase it from the publisher, which is Harvard Education Press, or you can purchase it from online from any Black bookstore. My closing thought would be, regardless of what we're seeing happening around us from the government, from the federal government, I would encourage us, one, to not acquiesce prematurely. A lot of what we see in these executive orders is illegal, and these things have to be determined. Have to determine the Congress, and it seems like too many people are acquiescing as if simply because the dictator in chief has put out an executive order, it is law. And that is not the case. And one of the best things I've heard in the last few days was the governor of, I think, Maine, telling the alleged president, I'll see you in court. So I just want to remind us that these things are meant to scare us, and that we don't have to acquiesce prematurely to anything. I would also just, regardless of what's happening in our government, to hold on to each other. That's how we historically have always made it through and made it forward, is by being connected to each other. And there are so many things competing for our attention and competing for our interests. There are so many messages we get around focus on our own self-interest, but there is no self-preservation without community. And so I would just remind us to be involved and invested in our community however we can. Thank you.
That was dope. There is no self-preservation without community. Absolutely. Spot on. Thank you so much. You coming back, right? You coming
Absolutely.
back? Okay.
Absolutely.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I got to get a copy of that book too. But everybody go check it out and buy from an independent Black bookstore. If you can, be it online or in your neighborhood or the next neighborhood over, buy your books from independent bookstores, from Black bookstores. Super important. So Akanke, let me turn it over to you.
I think CAMIKA said everything that I would say, actually. There has never been a fascist government that was not democratically elected. Fascism requires consent, and right now people are consenting prematurely. Like the president who imagines himself to be a king is throwing everything at the ceiling to see what sticks. We are not going to survive this getting up in arms about every toss. Educating yourself about the policies. Online, there are lawsuit trackers, so you should know what is being resisted, how and why. Being in community with people who are resisting. I was telling CAMIKA this week, I went to an educational forum hosted by organization Need and Deed, and they had state officials, city council, local organizations going over your laws and the laws and the rights. You should know your state laws with ICE. You should know your state laws, and with ICE, you should know the laws about what ICE can do and what cannot do. But those things are happening on a community level. So to echo what CAMIKA said, we need to be in community with each other. We need to look at the history of us being in community with each other. I mentioned earlier the SNCC Legacy Project. They do virtual training and community organizing. I think looking at those models is way more important than focusing on every single thing that Donald Trump is going to do. It is designed for chaos. And if we allow it to spin us into chaos, when it's time to fight, we're going to be tired. So right now, build with your community to build and prepare. That's it.
That's a lot. I wanted to bring us all three. Sorry for that mistake. God, there we go. Sorry. This is a lot, and I don't know that I think we touched on everything that is worthy and that is going to nourish us. I think we collectively, mostly you all, touched on everything. You all are getting text messages and it's all over where people are like, what are we going to do? And we see people freaking out. And understandably, right? No judgment. Understandably, I have my own version of freaking out, but it ain't on social media. You know what I mean? But more than the freak out, as shout out to Chief Ayanda when we talked about that, beyond that and more deeper, more important than that, right? We're human, right? We might shake, but we don't have to break. But there's a part of me that is coming up that says, don't we trust ourselves, right? Like, do we trust the work, the labor, the sacrifice, the stories that we don't know, but we know they exist, of people who have sacrificed their lives, their time, their children, their family. There's so many things so we could get here and be resilient. Do we not trust our ancestors, our educators, the mobilizers, the community activists, the ones you know about and the ones you don't? Do we not trust that we have within us that which can save us? Somebody is going to die. People have already died. Death is a fact of life. What is the saying? And I don't mean to say this so crudely, but nobody gets out of here alive, right? But we do have within our history, within our resources, within our reach, for real, that which can sustain us, that can give us life, that moves us forward. And so we got to trust that. We have to remember it, and then we got to trust it, and then we got to act, we got to bring it active. So let's just remember that conceptually. So that was just my way of adding to your brilliant points. And Akanke, I asked Kamika this, but you coming back, right?
Yeah, because I want to talk to Kamika more about education.
Yes, you can do that privately and publicly. You can do it here. This is a home. This is a home. I'm so deeply grateful for both of you coming on. This was way more enriching and a little bit more ad hoc than what I anticipated, but I think it was worth it. Shout out to everybody that we get y'all in the chat. We're making it interactive for all those who are watching. So let me close out and say this part for those who watched the Sonia Sanchez interview, right, just a couple of weeks ago. Y'all remember that was full of love. We was dancing in our seats. Like, Sonia Sanchez at 90 had us like in tears with her loving embrace, with her reminders about who we are and her stories of resistance. It was amazing. And then, in all of her generosity, she was like, and I want to do a haiku. I want to do a haiku. What did she say? A class, right? She was talking about poetry. If you don't know who Sonia Sanchez is, she's the living legend, poet, humanitarian educator, activist. But so I was like, yo, say less. We got you. We got you. We're going to do the class. So we have a team now, meaning myself. Shout out to Latoya. Shout out to Tim, who's going to be a part of this team. Because when I talked to Sonia Sanchez after that interview, y'all, when I tell you that she was ready, she's moving faster than I am. She is serious about the workshop. She's serious about those who want to study with her and do poetry with her, via this workshop. She's serious about it. She has grand ideas about this. So I want you all to email us. What is our email? Oh my gosh, the email for Killer Work Songs. That's who's producing these shows. What do we do? Aprilisms for right now. It's going to change. Aprilisms. April ISMS, Aprilisms at a Killer Work Songs. We will get you the information that you need, how you can register, how you can sign up, and get to work in a group setting, an intimate group setting with Sonia Sanchez. So I wanted to say that, put that out there so you all can know. The follow-up is real. We will definitely get that going. So on that note, everybody, please remember to tell your people Ascending is live every Saturday, 11 a.m. Eastern. You got to you got to subscribe. If you want to be in the chat, you got to subscribe 24 hours in advance to the Marc Lamont Hill official YouTube channel. Support us, support the channel. Tell your people We just thank you so much. And we have a whole bunch of people confirmed. We just got Malik Yoba confirmed. I didn't even tell the producers that. We got a yes from Malik Yoba. We got Liberation Farm, Black Veg Fest returning to Marc Lamont Hill channel. So they're coming back next Saturday. So shout out to everybody. Everybody, we thank you so much. And on that note, I'm out. I'm April R. Silver. I just want to say not only stay up, but stand up. Talk to you soon.